Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tribe Talk. I'm Ann Hutira alongside Dr. Elena Villanueva, and we're so happy to have you with us today. We're so excited to jump in today's conversation with Wade Lightheart. We're going to tell you all about Wade. He's a three-time Canadian national all natural bodybuilding champion who actually competed as a vegetarian. He's a former Mr. Universe competitor and host of the Awesome Health podcast. Now, Wade has been in the health industry for over 25 years. He's coached thousands of clients, and he's sought out by athletes and high performance oriented individuals for his advice on how to optimize their health and fitness levels. Now, Wade has authored numerous books on health, nutrition, and exercise, which have sold in over 80 countries. He's actually an advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute, and he's the co-founder and president at BiOptimizers, a digestive and health optimization company. Wade, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about your journey. I mean, obviously, you got started on this path to better health and optimization because of your own health and your own journey. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, there's points in everybody's life that I think shape your destiny. And sometimes we're not really clear about what those are when they first happen. But when I was 15, I was a Canadian kid, grew up just doing normal things in a very small town, rural area. But when I was 15, my parents moved to be caretakers of a resort, a private resort. And it was beautiful, but it was 5 miles to the nearest neighbor on a dirt road. The telephone poles, and I was not happy to go there when I was 15. For my parents, it was kind of paradise. And so that meant that I spent a lot of time by myself in a reflective type situation instead of just being out with my friends the normal way I would have been. So that was one thing. The second thing that happened is my sister, who was 4 years my senior, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. And I watched for the next 4 years as she went through the medical model before she died at the age of 22. And the impact of that was because I can remember specifically we'd be taking her home from the hospital, and we'd have to stop maybe 5-6 times on the 55-mile drive from the hospital, and she'd be vomiting and stuff. And I remember just saying to myself, why is the treatment seems to be worse than the disease? And so that was kind of a naive thought embedded in me, which I think had implications for me to get into the health industry. And the third thing that happened is she gave me a bodybuilding magazine. Now, all of this happened in a very short period of time and kind of spanned out over decades. But she gave me a bodybuilding magazine that had Troy Zuclotta, which was a blonde guy like myself, and he had just won Mr. California, and he had these two pretty girls on the cover in bikinis, and I had never seen anything like that before, and being driven mad with testosterone and nothing else to do. I said, well, I'm going to start maybe getting some muscles. So I started, and I also thought that if I got muscles, I got healthy on the outside. What I thought was healthy in my naive 15-year-old way is that maybe I could prevent the situation that was happening to my sister. And so I built a gym in my barn because there was no gym to go to, and it was rocky with pulleys, and it was very crude. But I built a vision and a dream over there. And I used to I'd go out there and freeze my hands to the bar when it was 30 below and things like that. And my parents were saying, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I fell in love with the sport, but I had read Education of a Bodybuilder by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And inside that book, he said 3 things that changed my life. He says, you can achieve anything you want in your life if you have a positive attitude, self-discipline, and hard work. Well, everybody I knew worked hard. I didn't know anybody that didn't work hard. It was a very rough, rural, fishing, mining, forestry. I was picking rocks and cutting trees. It was very rural and rough. And everybody was wore out by the time they were 50s. They all kind of walk like this, and everybody was, and it's like, well, but nobody was talking about self-discipline. Nobody was talking about a positive attitude. And at the time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was the most famous actor in the world, and he had won all these Mr. Universe championships. And I made it a point in my life. I said, I'm going to win the Mr. Universe contest. I'm going to live in Venice Beach, California, like Arnold did. And I'm going to own a nutritional supplement company one day and help the world be healthier. And that led me to go to university and study exercise physiology and nutrition. And then I wasn't really impressed with what I felt was a whole bunch of compartmentalized information. There was no synergy within it. So at that point, I kept moving on in my bodybuilding career and started mentoring under different people. My coach, Scott Abel, kind of transcended me into the national stage. I worked in every single aspect of the nutrition industry, from being a sponsored athlete to owning my own store, to working for other companies, to developing my own products and writing books and being a personal trainer. So I worked at literally every, even warehousing. I mean, I did it all. And over that whole journey, eventually it led me to here when a friend of mine, Matt Gallant, who was also in the personal training business, I had got back from the Mr. Universe contest in 2003. And he said, hey, this is really unusual. You're not on drugs. You're a vegetarian. You're competing at the World Championships. That's really rare. Maybe we could sell this stuff online. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Nobody's making money online. That's crazy. I don't even own a computer, because I had been living in an ashram. I had actually thought I was going to give up all my possessions and be a meditating monk, but the monks told me that I wasn't really qualified for that life. So, so I had come back. I had no computers, no anything. I just had a title, and I had a health challenge from my competitive aspects, the unmitigated competitive nature and where it can lead you. And we started a company. And that was the beginning of BiOptimizers over 16 years ago. And it's morphed from, first we were helping people in the high performance space and bodybuilding and muscle building and aesthetics. And then that moved as we aged and got out of that world, more into performance and health. And that's what created the triangle of aesthetics, performance, and health, the three areas where I think attract people into this sport or into this lifestyle. Most of us want to be more attractive to our preferred sexual partner. But eventually you're like, I just got to keep up with the kids and the job and all this. So it's more performance based. And then eventually you get to the point is like, geez, I just want my health. And so we address people from all facets of society, wherever they're coming in at, and how to optimize that and avoid some of the mistakes that I've made.
Wade, talk a little bit about, you're obviously expert in nutrition. Digestion is your big thing. Talk about, we see a lot of clients who are also working on healing their gut, getting out toxins, detoxing infection. And we go through gut healing and getting to that place of wellness and then optimizing from a gut perspective. Talk about why it's so important that someone addresses their gut, and what's the single biggest thing someone can do to help their digestion?
Really great questions. And I think the most important thing for people to recognize, and right now I think it's 12 or 13% of the emergency hospital visits right now are gastrointestinal related issues. 100 million people a day are suffering from some sort of digestive distress. 25% of those are on permanent prescription medication, most of which you should only be on for 4 to 6 weeks before you address this. So what we have to first understand is the unintended consequences of technological innovation. In 1945, the United States changed the world by dropping a nuclear bomb on Japan, ending the war and ushering in the nuclear age. Subsequent to that, two things happened. One, it made all the nitrogen bombs of the past obsolete. Second thing that happened, there was a baby boom and a massive explosion of the population. Prior to that, most people lived on farms or involved farming, but now there was this huge manufacturing, industrial, technological revolution that happened. So the governments of the world, as people came into cities and started working in manufacturing, realized we have a food crisis. How are we going to support all these people 10, 20, 30 years down the road? This created agricultural bodies and government organizations, and we moved into monoculture farming instead of crop rotation, and being concentrated on nutrient density and having a soil reconditioning. They used to plow hemp into the soil and let it go fallow and plant squash this year and potatoes this year and tomatoes that year on the same. So what happened, and then we got into packaging, producing, and distributing those products over long periods of time, stripping out essential enzymatic components and essential probiotics, the two things that do work that make your gut work. Now, we didn't realize the consequences of that, but then of course, all of a sudden, we still can't produce enough food. So they say, hey, let's take this leftover nitrogen, put that on the ground, and we can grow the plants further, which gives up essential protein to convert to enzymes, which limits the amount of minerals and vitamins. So now you're getting more yield from a poor definition of food. But we're getting, we're getting 100 grams of this and 100 grams of that, but it's not nutrified or nutrient dense or has all the phytonutrients components on it. Then the plants started to weaken because these are essential components to the plant's immunity. So we went, hey, great. Let's take these chemicals and add herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides to fight off the funguses and the bacteria and the insects that are eating this. Now, interesting enough, all of those chemicals destroy bugs by disrupting their natural enzymatic processes. And then pasteurization kills all of the good, the bad, and the ugly probiotics that we would naturally be consuming if we consume that food out of our garden, let's say. So now we've got, and then because the food starts to get blander and not taste as much, they start using dyes and preservatives because it's long thing. So in the course of the last 80 years, we've stripped much of the protein content out of the food. We've stripped out all of the enzymes through manufacturing and production and mass farming. We've taken out, through pasteurization and sterilization, all of the good bacteria. We took out the bad ones too. Then we added a host of chemicals which disrupt living organisms' essential metabolic processes. And then we added preservatives and dyes onto that, which have a host of metabolic issues. Now, we pass this on generationally on the third generation. And according to Dr. Edward Howell, who wrote the book, Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity, he took these experiments with all these different animals, and when you fed animals an enzymatically deficient diet, by the third generation, they elicited three things. One, strange sociological behaviors. Go on Facebook, you can see it, okay? Social media, there it is. Number two, a massive increase in genetic-based diseases. If you look at the rise in genetic-based diseases over the last 40 years, this is not based on normal mutations within a species. There are agents that are forcing this, whether it's the sun, whether it's chemicals, whatever, it doesn't fit the model, what's happening on genetic diseases. And the third thing is the inability to procreate. And if you look at the challenges that people are having children right now with, all these fertility clinics and everything going on, all this stuff. So all of these complex issues, you go, well, it's this and it's that. No, we altered the food supply. The food supply changed the internal biology of us, which had external manifestations, passed on in 3 generations, and left us with people like yourselves trying to dig people out of something going, well, I'm kind of eating like my parents did, or I'm not doing anything different than my neighbor. But the problem is they're looking at the context of their life in a life that is radically different than our ancestors just 3 generations before for millions of years. So we're in a situation where people don't understand the context of the problem we're dealing with. And just switching to all natural food and your organic diet and all this sort of stuff, when you are in a compromised position, isn't enough. It's not going to work because you've mutated and altered, and specifically in the digestive system itself. We get gut permeability, you get leaky gut, you've got whole species of bacteria that aren't there. So that person has neurochemical imbalances. Another person has immune response mechanisms that doesn't work. Or they lack key enzymes that they're not able to digest fats or carbohydrates or proteins or whatever it happens to be. And that comes out as inflammatory response things. So all of these diseases that are cascading out, as Hippocrates illustrated 2,000 years ago, hey, you know what? All disease begins in the gut. So what people have to recognize is you're battling an environmental situation that is far greater than you can imagine. And I think your moral and ethical duty to the generations to come is to recognize is these are the stressors that are happening to the human population right now. And as humans who are going to survive and procreate and accept the next generation, it's our moral and ethical responsibility to take health in our own hands under the conditions we find ourselves. So maybe our ancestors had to deal with cave bears and, lava and earthquakes and tidal typhoons, and they had to figure out how to do that. We have to figure out how to navigate massive food production, chemicalization, genetic mutation, and recognize it's our imperative to solve this, not just for ourselves, but for the kids to come, or they won't come. And we're seeing that. And so it's a much more it's a much bigger picture than most people can think of, because they just think of kind of poor me and what do I do and how come I can't fix this with one simple pill.
You know, you totally are speaking our language. I mean, 1000% you're speaking our language. We also are seeing the severity of the impact that, of how sick people have become. We are the sickest industrialized nation in the world, and every other country follows what we do. We lead the rest of the world in everything, in food choices, in fashion, in in chemical use, in medications, surgeries, whatever it is. And so the rest of the world has become very, very sick. And to your point, if we don't educate people and let them see what has happened that is causing everyone in the world to become chronically ill, then our future generations, they're not going to have the same opportunities that we're going to have. um you know it's scary to think of where things are going to go. We do a lot of when we see a lot of these chronically ill people that come to us, they have been, they started out with GI issues. Maybe they still have GI issues, and now 5 or 6 or 10 other issues on top of that. They've been on medications for 7 to 15 years. They've gotten worse instead of getting better. My first question is, well, why did you do it for 15 years? If it wasn't making you better, why did you keep doing it? They said, well, that's why I'm here seeing you now. So it's taken them 15 years before they finally, pop their head out of the sand and go, what I'm doing isn't working. And, they'll listen to like one of our, 5-part masterclass series, and they'll start learning about the main underlying causes of disease and dysfunction and genetic mutations and all of these different issues. And, one of them being environmental chemical toxins. And so I hear you talking about this, and I love how, like, we can speak the same language, and you can talk about it from this angle, and I can talk about it from this angle, and Anne can talk about it from this angle, because people need to understand what's going on. Less than 10% of all of the chemicals that are being used in our environment, in our food supply, in our water supply, in our clothes, in our body lotions, in everything that we're in contact with, less than 10% of them are even regulated. And the ones who are regulated, the chemicals that are regulated, they're self-regulated by the companies that made the chemicals. It's a complete farce, and people need to understand that just because it's on the shelf doesn't mean that it's safe to use. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm 100% agreement. And there's a couple of issues that I think that if we're looking at what we're experiencing as a society, and number one is mass hypnotism, in the fact that, well, if everybody else is doing it, it must be okay. Kind of, 15-year-olds standing out by the smoking tree saying, well, my friends are smoking, so it must be okay.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of mentality. And number one, the admonishment of responsibility to somebody else. Yeah. It's the government's fault. It's the regulatory body's fault. It's my doctor's fault. It's my spouse's fault. It's my genetic heritage fault. Like, there is a disassociation from the responsibility that a doctor's job, a medical doctor, if you're going into a medical facility, they're just doing what they can to keep you alive. They're not if you look at the New England Journal of Medicine, it says we treat the symptoms of disease, right? And that's what our medical model is very good at doing. It's, hey, you got pain, we'll take that away from you. You need a surgery, we'll cut that open. You're in a car accident, great. But they're not trained, nor are they specialists in how to in making you healthy. That's our job, because health is something that you do on a day-to-day basis. You can't go to an office visit and get health. You can't buy health at Best Buy or on Amazon. It's what you do as a practice, and that comes to responsibility. So what happens when someone comes to a holistic person's office, on whatever aspect they're in? Well, that person is going to set forth a course of action. Now, one of the biggest issues is compliance to that. And they have to overcome the gravity of their habits, their social pressures, the economics, and this is a big one that I think is one that really bothers me a lot, and that is the economics of being healthy today on the current circumstances are significant. I spend an incredible amount of money on my health, as does almost everybody I know who has good to great health. And I think a lot of people are very compromised on those areas, and they don't have the resources and the economics to do it. And meanwhile, they're going to have to interact or initiate some practices, some economical practices around food and practices that are so invasive. I think a lot of people go, you know what? I'm not willing to change my life. I'm just going to handle managed decline instead. And that's a choice that people can make. I don't think it's the choice that people are going to be listening to this, but I'm saying that because people listening to this have to recognize that the people around them, friends and family, probably will not understand or not support your journey to decide that you are going to create health for you, nor is it your prerogative to spend a disproportionate amount of your energetic resources trying to convince them that what your way is the best way, so that you can feel bolstered psychologically to do the things that you need to do to correct it. And that's a really important part, because I think a lot of people who are struggling with health, they get a little bit of information, they get motivated, and they get smashed by their relationships in their life, or the habits that they've instilled, or the economics of it. And they're saying, hey, you know what? I'm not spending my money on this anymore. I'm spending my money on this researcher or this doctor or these nutrients. And I need to do this for my health. Well, they go, well, why don't you just use your insurance program where you can, get a surgery, and you can, just get your guts rewired and cut that out of you, and take your gallbladder out. That's okay, right? And we'll sew you back up, and we'll put you on some medications and stuff. Yeah, there might be some complications. We'll just give you a course of antibiotics on top of that, and then the cascade begins. And once you're inside that loop, it becomes even more difficult, because now, as you kind of indicated, well, not only do you have the initial problem, but now you have a cascade of problems caused by the temporary solutions to the first problem. Right.
Now,
so
it's going to cost you twice as much to get your health back.
Oh, maybe more. And
Yeah.
the time invested.
Yeah.
And when you're making a recovery in health, there are things like healing crises that people go through, which are real. And when you start detoxifying the body, and all of a sudden you break out in hives one day, or you start having, strange gastrointestinal responses for a short period of time, or fluctuations within weight or brain, and it can be very disconcerting to people. And although they're right on the cusp of making progress, they oftentimes abandon the pathway that's set forth by the expert guidance that they have. And this is where I believe I have a little part which I call getting your Jedi counsel. And I have a Jedi council, and these are the people who are experts in the areas that I am not an expert in, which are vast and endless. And I go to them to feed me the information, and so that I can follow a strategy and stay to it in a sea of adversity of other people's opinions. And that serves me very well, and it served my clients very well. And I think that's really important. You always have your I call your quarterback. Your quarterback is kind of the person that you trust the most, and they've got the most knowledge and of a particular area. But they also, I always say, great people know great people, and they'll say, well, I'm do this, and that person does that, so we can integrate this and integrate that, and then we've got a good program for you as you move forward. And then they get to a point where it becomes addictive. It's like, oh wow, now I've solved that problem. What else can I do? And then the next thing you know, you're running marathons and starting multiple companies and that sort of stuff. It just kind of once you get past that hurdle, then you unlock the potential that God gave us all.
But you got to get past that hurdle, and
Correct.
that's the part that I hope that for all of the all of our followers, all of our amazing listeners who are listening to this, if you haven't already gone through your healing journey, then this listen carefully to this. If you already have, then you're nodding your head as we're talking about this. Healing crises is real. Feeling uncomfortable is real. Having a detox response, whether it's a physical one or an emotional detox
Hmm.
response, which is very common when you're physically detoxing your body, for you to have emotional detox responses as well. We are so brainwashed to step away from the discomfort. We need to lean into the discomfort. The discomfort is showing us something. It's teaching us something, right? And when you have the right coaches and the right mentors around you to show you and say, yeah, you know what? You've got like 20 thorns in your right ass cheek. We're going to have to pull all 20 of those out, and it's going to hurt. But the only way that that right ass cheek is going to heal is for us to pull all 20 of those thorns out. So, just get ready. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and if you don't, it's going to fester and you're going to get worse. And the pain you're going to have is going to be worse. And the suffering you're going to have is going to be worse. And so, the healing crises, it's absolutely real. But like you said, once you get through it, then it's like, oh my God, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? And then that's where, people end up getting into, biohacking and optimization, that can become fun. That's expensive too, to keep your body optimized. Unfortunately, we really do live in a very toxic world, and there are a lot of changes that have to be made. But I think that if we can approach it with some foundational changes to our perspective on how valuable we are as individuals, it can make it a little bit easier to walk through that.
Yeah, two things that brings to mind when you say that, and I couldn't agree with you more. And that was probably the most misquoted person in scientific history is Charles Darwin. And it's most often quoted as survival of the fittest. If you actually research and read his material, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable, which was figured out by Charles Darwin. I think he was in the Galapagos when he saw the blue-footed booby bird and realized that its adaptability to environments allowed it to survive and thrive, even though it didn't seem like it had all these other things. And humans, if you look compared to animals, we're very much compromised in a lot of areas, but we're extremely adaptable and became the most dominant species on the planet. And the other thing that I learned a long time ago was watching, unusually enough, Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they were interviewing him. And he said, I go to the gym and I fall down and I'm in pain and I pass out or whatever. And he goes, it's that 10th and 12th and 13th, 14th, 15th rep where you go through this pain period. He says, you go through this pain period, you get to be a champion. You don't go through this. He said, you may get to be a champion. You don't go through this, you might as well forget about it. And people go, well, I'm not a Mr. Universe competitor. No, but your health is such a delicate thing. It's such, and I learned intimately with my sister's illness early on that your health is not a guarantee and your life is not a guarantee, regardless of what age you are or what you think that trajectory should be. And almost everybody comes to a point where they recognize, I don't have the health that I thought I had, and I don't have the time that I thought I had. And everybody comes to that realization sooner or later. And the sooner that you can deal with that fact and recognize, hey, we're on this planet for a period of time. We don't know how long. It's relatively short. Time is ticking. What is the consequence of me not taking action? Not just for me, but for the generations to come.
Yeah. Wade, let's dive a little bit into diet. Now, you're a vegetarian.
Mhm.
What did you learn being a vegetarian, or what have you learned that can really apply to anybody and everybody out there, regardless of what diet they follow?
Sure. Number one, I'm dietary agnostic. To pick the diet that's right for you. I'm not a
Yeah.
vigilante vegan, shouting at people at the first store on the street. I want to be clear about that. My
Well,
business partner is a ketogenic guy, right? So,
yeah. Well, you're totally speaking our language
Yeah.
with that as well. We can see clinically. I mean, the proof is in the pudding that there's not one diet that's designed for all people. And even within the individual, as they go through their seasons in their life, their dietary needs change. So they may do very, very well for a year doing mostly vegan, and then they may hit a point in their journey of life where where they feel or their body shows them or gives them signs of, whether it's on a lab or just because they're very in tune with their body, that they need to start putting animal protein in it. So it's very, very diverse depending on the individual. We are totally with you on that.
Yeah, every diet has advantages and disadvantages. And so what a lot of people mistake, and you see this all the time, they go from diet to diet. So they start on this diet, and then 2 years down the road, it corrected, X, Y, Z. But then, 2 years down the road, they started to develop ABC because of deficiencies within that diet or genetic variants or epigenetics or whatever response. And then they go on that diet, and then they, so on and so forth. So that's number one. So number two is you need to recognize what dietary practice is best supportive of you, your lifestyle, your temperament. That's first. Second, what are the weaknesses within that diet relative to your unique genetics, epigenetics, and biochemistry? This is where experts come in with testing.
True.
And you can say, okay, you know what? I'm on a vegetarian-based diet, but I'm very deficient in magnesium, and I got to make sure I have B12, and my zinc levels are low, are going to start messing up my hormonal conversions. So I'm going to supplement those diets appropriately. I'm going to do a SpectraCell test, and I can see I can keep up all my things at the proper regulatory components. And I'm going to check my hormones regularly to see if everything gets crashing. I'm going to make sure that I do well on a plant-based diet, that I can check my blood sugar to glucose ratio and a HOMO-IR and see that I'm very stable on that diet where other people aren't. I can look at my, if you're on a ketogenic diet, but you start to realize that you have a lot of, you take a pulse test and see that you have a lot of heart-related damage or potential lesions and maybe a history of that, might want to switch. Maybe you can do keto on a plant-based diet to avoid some of those things. Like, you can make adjustments within the framework of the diet that you choose if you have the data and an expert to interpret the data for you. Because listening to say, hey, Bob took this and, started to leap tall buildings with a single bound, and that was the one thing that just changed everything. Well, you are, what? I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you, because there is no one thing. One thing might be the next thing that takes you forward, and there's a disproportionate kind of in the zealotry or response to that, because you have that sort of bell curve of responsiveness. And, if your essential fatty acids are low, and which I've experienced because I had a problem metabolizing fats, and I added lipolytic 4 different lipase enzyme into my diet, my ability to digest and metabolize fats went through the roof instantly. Now, that was an awesome thing. I had that problem for 15, 20 years, and my diet acclimatized that I kept a very low-fat diet. But now I was able to develop much more fats in my life, which had a positive corollary effect on my hormone levels. And then when I looked at that, I was realizing, I got a test on hormone levels, and we realized that if I added a little bit of zinc and B6 and some B12, my conversion, instead of going to the estrogen nature, would go to the testosterone nature. Well, that's a difference in a couple of 100 points on my testosterone, and even better on my testosterone to estrogen ratio. So these are little incremental things that I've had experts to help me identify. Now, I'm not to say, hey, fats are going to save the world. I'm not here to say zinc is going to be the thing that's going to, give you ferocious wood every morning or something as a guy, or, you know what I mean? It's like, you can say that, but you're not contextualizing it properly. So context is everything. Expert guidance is essential, and getting the right tests to optimize the deficiencies within your test. So we'll always go back to that. And then from there, once you've got that whole playbook, okay, chances are you're probably going to have to fix your digestion now and work on your gut and work on these things, because that's where most of the areas where people are running into the first stage of problems. Because it doesn't matter if you put whatever into your body, you can't digest, absorb, and utilize it. It's of no use and could potentially become a toxin.
I love that. Based on a lot of the data, all this, testing and stuff, it really can help drive, more specificity in terms of dietary needs, but it can also help drive specificity in supplementation as well. Now, talk to us a little bit about that, because I know that, you've got some ideas on, how the supplement or nutritional supplement industry, could be maybe changed or improved a little bit. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think probably too much about the dietary industry, and I'll be frank. I was introduced to it early, and just as a kind of a naive guy reading muscle magazines and saying, take this weird, vanadyl sulfate or boron and have your testosterone go through roof. And I became acutely aware over a very short period of time of the distortion of marketing information and its actual effects, and the ability to extrapolate and borrow from research data and project it onto a marketing campaign and using inferior products in an uncontrolled situation to create, quote unquote, a magic pill. And certainly there's a psychosomatic effect to that, which drives a lot of the industry. And then what I found as I went a little bit deeper is almost all of the great products in the world have been developed by somebody who ran into a major challenge in their life, couldn't solve the problem, and said they went to the ends of the earth to find this nutrient or this chemical or this agent or this combination or this whatever that corrected a very big problem. And then they found other people that had that problem and started to advocate it. So I would say that you're dealing with a 95 to 5%. 95% are Me Too products, which are based on marketing, hype, trends, and margin. And you want to stay away from those. That stocks the store shelves. And then there's 5%, which are based on mission and science and what I would call, I hate to use the word medical, but I would say medically minded people who are on a mission to help people and are qualified to evaluate the efficacy of a product and the efficacy of whether that works for somebody. And so those people kind of work in conjunction. You go to your typical ND or your doctor and they go, you know what? I know you need this nutrient, but you need to get it from this company because they do a good job with it. And there's other things out there, because oftentimes you might get the right idea, but the product doesn't deliver for a variety of contamination or product issues about it. And so you need to have that expertise to not just evaluate what you need, but the quality of what you're putting in your body that's concordant to what your body requires.
And and I would take that a step further and say, um, I wouldn't say medically based, because medically based, most medical doctors, and this is just the honest to God truth, most medical doctors don't know squat about nutrition or healthy
Correct.
diets. That's
Correct.
why everybody is so sick. I would say evidence based scientists, researchers, and evidence based practitioners, people like us, we're the ones who understand that concept. And so I would just jump right out of the whole word medical and go into evidence based.
Yeah, evidence based is
Yeah.
a great, it's
Yeah.
a great. Although, when the current political minds, I'm not so sure about evidence based anymore. But
Well,
that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other topic. Like,
Well, there's a lot.
I get what you're saying. No,
Yeah.
I believe that people who have dedicated. That's why I said kind of a scientifically
Yeah.
minded person with the proper credentials and background to help you evaluate your body and the things it needs and how to positively implement it in your life without compromising it, and that leads to optimal health. And that's where the Jedi Council comes in.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's kind of where we emerged. And of course, most people know, and after my Mr. Universe contest, I was applying what I would call a meat-based mentality into a performance-based sport. And the performance-based sport was based on aesthetics, which is interesting in itself. So I was at what's people would call the cosmetic ideal of physical performance. And that is that you look a certain way, you have a certain body fat, you have a certain muscularity and endurance and stuff like that. And that's what you compete at the Mr. Universe contest. And I knocked it out of the park, but no one had done that as a vegetarian. And I made some very distinct mistakes that compromised my digestive system.
Mhm.
So after the Mr. Universe contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks and went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. And this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Number one, I could identify with my clients who were grossly obese and didn't know why, because I couldn't figure this out. Number two, I got to find a world-class medical doctor who had given up his medical license to dive in depth. He had overcome cirrhosis of the liver and colon cancer, and was also the guy that was behind the recovery of Dr. Bernard Jensen, who brought back iridology. And most people don't know he had cancer late in his life and was almost dead. And he wrote his book, Come Alive. And the guy that brought him back by reconstituting his enzymatic and probiotic capabilities was a fellow by the name of Dr. O'Brien. And it just so happened, I attended a lecture with this guy just before the Mr. Universe, and he challenged all my belief systems. And then when everything messed up, I went to a full practitioner's workshop with him. And he was like in his 70s, and he's super vibrant. He's got all this energy, and he's like glowy skin. I'm like, man, I want to be this guy. And I'm like, this guy, what did I do wrong? I thought I had the best coach. I got the best training. I've got Spartan discipline. I've been to the world championships, and I suck. And I went to him, and I said, Michael, what happened? How did I end up this way? And he said something that changed my life. He said, Wade, you've learned to build the body from the outside in. I'm going to teach you to build the body from the inside out. And so I went on his program, and at the time it was $1,500 a month. And I took massive amounts of enzymes and probiotics and minerals and special greens and chlorophyll, like all this kind of stuff. And in 6 months, not only had I regained my physical capability, like I got my physique back, but leading up to those contests, I had joint pain, I had brain fog, I had low energy, all of the kind of things that are associated with that performance. I just say, that's normal. You want to pay the price, and you that's what it takes to win. And that was accepted. All of a sudden, I didn't have to suffer those things. And so over the next 4 years, we coached 15,000 people from every walk of life to kind of work out all the permutations Matt and I did in our business. And then I made a comeback. 3.5 weeks, I got ready for the national championship, won that, went to the Worlds in 3 months, won that, did everything I could possibly do and didn't have any side effects. And at that point, I was like, okay, now I can perform at my highest level, hit my performance levels, hit my aesthetics goals while maintaining my health. We're ready to take this message to the world, and we've done so ever since. And that was the foundational components of BiOptimizers. And we started with digestive health. We both had stories of repairing our own digestive health and went through his tutelage. But then we started to extrapolate upon that to kind of expand our offerings and our capabilities as a company and what we do. And now it's becoming very much in vogue, even though 15, 20 years ago, people thought we were crazy. We were the first people to introduce enzymes into the bodybuilding market. Almost every protein powder now has enzymes in it. We were one of the first companies to advocate proteolytic enzymes, proteolytic probiotics. No one was talking about it back then for undigested proteins. And a lot of the biohacking stuff I use from performance, from hyperbaric chambers and mind machines and things like that, we advocated all of that stuff back then. And now it's become mainstream and quote unquote biohacking. So we call it biological optimization, but it's all the same.
I love that. And you have, with some of the current lines of supplementations that you have some BiOptimizers or BiOptimizers. Can you tell us what you offer with that?
Yeah. So we have a vast array of digestive aids along with nervous system and brain optimization technology. So we started in the gut, we moved to the nervous system, and now we're really passionate about brain optimization. And so our original product was a product called Masszymes, enzymes for the masses, which is a combination of 17 different enzymes, 55% of which are proteolytic enzymes. There's 5 different enzymes that work in all the pH ranges, because undigested protein is one of the biggest inflammatory agents inside the body. And so we needed to address that because people were not breaking that down. Later on, we developed Capex, which is a high proteolytic, high fat enzymatic formulation with some biostimulators and stuff for people who are on a ketogenic diet, like Matt, my business partner. And then we also developed a patented probiotic strain, which is basically we took a strain of probiotics, and we have PhD researchers in a university that Matt and I just think of what's the next crazy thing that we can do. So we blast probiotics with vitamins and minerals and EMFs and dyes and chemicals. And we just learn how these things mutate and adapt and what we can do to enhance them and what screws them up. And it's very variant. So we started developing probiotic formulas based on that. And we have one that's the probiotics that develop the neurotransmitters for your brain. So a lot of people can't develop the polypeptide chains for their neurochemicals because they're lacking key probiotics in their gut. They got wiped out by antibiotics years ago, or their diet or genetic heritage or whatever. And so we can help people that way. We do have some parasite herbal concoctions, as well as some herbal concoctions for constipation that are used in short-term situations. So those aren't, all the time. Hydrochloric acid. We have a HCl breakthrough, which is a balanced mineral balance and enzyme component. So each one of our products works independently or in conjunction. One of our coolest products is a product called Leaky Gut Guardian, which rebuilds the biofilm. It's so exciting because we actually can demonstrate in our labs about this actually builds the biofilm. So leaky gut and gut permeability is a big problem for inflammatory responses in people. And we've nailed it. Using IG Max, which is the one of the ingredients in here. And when you stack it with the right probiotics, it just builds that mucal liner that protects you from the transient of potentially toxic, whether it's your food or other chemical agents. And then we've got, of course, last year we released Magnesium Breakthrough, which is a component of 7 different magnesiums put together, which has remarkable effects on people's brain function, nervous system, and sleep, because we're so deficient in magnesium. And different magnesiums are absorbed by different parts of the body. So that was really exciting product. And then this year we unleashed just recently individualized nootropic formulations, which are customized to each individual brain. So a person will fill out a form, and our neurochemists will read that form and what's your dominance. We have 8 different formulations that you're sent out to you. And then from that, you give your feedback, because everybody's neurochemistry is like, there's about 8 main different neurochemicals that fluctuate between, if you remember those 80s equalizers, it's kind of like this. And so when you feel happy and connected or hyper-focused, there's a correlated neurochemical. And one of the reasons people can't access certain states is because of neurochemical deficiency. And so what we do is we address the gut issues and make sure you're manufacturing neurochemicals. Then we're like, okay, well, let's add these specific stuff to, we call it filling up your bucket in those neurochemicals that allows you a vaster or greater array of emotional and psychological capabilities. And it's pretty extraordinary. And we're really excited about this. We believe this is the 3rd generation of nootropics. And again, in a massively increasing, technologically advancing society, I think the stress of the adaptation that we are as a species are facing, because of we never planned on staring into these blue light computers and dealing with all these EMFs and eating all these chemicalized foods. It's really put a issue on mental health. And your brain is connected to your gut. And once you solidified that, well, how do you optimize it? And that's where we're at now. And it's a lot of fun. And if I get a chance, I'll hook you guys up and you can start playing around with it. But we're talking, it's a major performance maximizer.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And the whole world of nootropics is absolutely amazing. And I jumped into that as a part of my own brain healing, when I had pretty much complete memory loss and full-blown dementia in my 30s. The nootropics was one part of helping me get more optimization once I had worked back to baseline. So I'm excited to actually try it. And we actually have an offer for our listeners. Anne, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wade, it's been so great having you here today, hearing you talk about your own journey. It's really inspiring. And we want to encourage everybody to check out Wade's company. Check out the website, BiOptimizers.com. We'll have that down below so you can see that. They've given us a discount code, TribeTalk10, for everybody who's listening and watching to get 10% off, your purchase. So go check it out. Wade, thanks for being here. Thanks for offering the discount for all of our listeners. We've really enjoyed hearing you talk about your journey and what's gotten you here.
Well, thanks very much. And I'll add one piece if you don't mind. And
Sure.
a couple things that was very important in our company. We're very education based. So if you go to those links, you can download my 84-day awesome health course, which is everything I learned condensed in 5 to 15 minute videos in sequential order. And we don't even get to supplements to the fifth level of lessons. Second thing is we just released the BiOptimization blueprint, which is basically a strategic game plan of how you go about becoming a biohacker systematically, what we've learned over the last 20 years. And then the third thing is every one of our products has a 365-day guarantee. If you take our products, not only we will provide you the information of how to use it and how to optimize it and all that sort of stuff, but if for any reason somebody doesn't like it or doesn't work for them or they don't feel good, it's no problem. They let our company know and we just give you your money back. So we de-risk it because we're very strong about what we do and we do it very well. But we also recognize, hey, there might be for whatever reason, it didn't work for that person. And I don't want to be a disservice to the industry itself. So we take away all the risk from any product. We back it up. We have a wonderful customer service. And I personally answer all of the questions that come through to our staff. I think we've got a running list of over 8,000 questions that our team goes through, and anything that we haven't read goes directly to me. And if I can't answer it, I find the expert that can.
Mhm.
Wow, thank you. That's so impressive, and I love what you're doing. I love your mission. I can't wait to have you back on our show again, and let's educate some more people. Let's collaborate and let's see what else that we can do together, because education is going to be what's going to change the world for our future generations. And thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
We'll talk to you soon.
You bet.